The normal practice whenever a new piece of territory came into the hands of the Islamic state of Medina, it was that it became the common property of the state, and then it came under the control of the Prophet in order that it should be assigned according to his discretion. But there were some occasions when a piece of land or property was coming into the personal ownership of the Prophet himself. And this is what happened with a parcel of land called Fadak. This was a land that was rich in trees and in plantations, so that it was a way of generating some income. This then became the private property of Muhammad himself. This he left in his will so that it should become the property of his daughter Fatima, and then it should be inherited by her family, the al-Bayt, and in that way it would provide a constant stream of income for them. However, after the Prophet died, things didn't work out according to the way that the Prophet had intended in his will. The head of the community, who was appointed at that time, Abu Bakr, decided that Fadak should be included in the common ownership of the state instead of being regarded as private property which could be then left to Fatima. And the argument that was made was that prophets do not leave an inheritance. Of course, if we go back in history and we look at earlier prophets, that really wasn't true. But it's also this difference between the private property of the prophet and the public property of the collective, or let's say the state. So the reality was that Abu Bakr refused to allow this property to pass over into the hands of Lady Fatima, and so it led to a real point of contention, of dispute between them. The dispute was such that she refused ever to have anything to do with Abu Bakr again. She refused to see him, to talk with him, or to discuss the matter. She was disgusted, not just with the way that she had been treated, but with the way in which the instructions of the Prophet, as laid out in his will, had been disregarded and ignored. Before he died, when he was coming close to death, the Prophet called Lady Fatima to him and explained to her that he was soon going to die and he would leave her. Of course, she was distressed at this news because he was telling her that her father was going to be taken from her. But then he called her close again and he whispered to her, and now people said her face changed. She was wreathed in smiles. And she explained later that the Prophet had said to her, "Although I am going now, you will be the first of my family to follow me." And so this brought joy to her because she felt that she would not long live separate from her father. And indeed, that was the reality. Lady Fatima died a few months after the Prophet. But events leading up to her death are covered in a degree of disagreement and confusion between different schools of Islam. The Shia community have a particular understanding of the events that took place. And they recount that a group of men led by Umar came to the house of Ali to try to persuade him that he would endorse Abu Bakr as being the legitimate successor. And something happened on that occasion which resulted in some injury to Lady Fatima, and that resulted, with great misfortune, in her miscarrying the child that she had in her womb at that stage. And it was soon after this event that she died. Before Fatima died, she had discussed the arrangements for her burial with her husband, Imam Ali. And she had made it very clear that she should be buried in secret, that only immediate close members of the family should be allowed to attend, that in particular Abu Bakr and Umar should not be told about her death until after she was buried, and should not be told where she was buried. So this tension over the land of Fadak continued even after her death. Ali prepared the body of his dead wife for burial. And after the body had been prepared, he then went out at night in secret, together with just very close immediate members of the family, and they buried Lady Fatima in secret according to her wishes. And it is not clear even to this day where she was buried. Some reports say that she was buried in the cemetery of al-Baqi, others that she was buried close to the grave of her father in what is today the Prophet's Mosque. But her burial was kept secret. Now, in this way, the dispute over this land of Fadak, which had gone on from the time of the Prophet, from the time of his will onwards, was an ongoing sore between the household of the Prophet and those who took power after the Prophet died. It became a sign, a gesture of the way in which they were deprived not only of leadership of the community, which was their right according to Shia understanding of the will of God and the will of the Prophet, but also the merest financial inheritance so that the family could have stability and could continue into the future. And in this way, the tension had built up. And we see that tendency to keep away from the political leadership after the death of the Prophet was a hallmark of the time of the first three caliphs, for Lady Fatima, of course, but also for Imam Ali also, that Ali saw it as being a time of test and patience for him, that he should concentrate on the spiritual welfare of the community, that he should build them up, he should instruct in the Quran and the correct interpretation of the Quran, so that in this way he was fulfilling the duties, the spiritual duties of being the head of the community, the imam, but he did not have political power. And indeed, he kept far away from that political power unless it was necessary that he was called on to share his wisdom with the whole community. This tension with Lady Fatima is an ongoing sore right up through the generations within the Shia community, that people are distressed, people mourn, people grieve the loss of the dignity of the daughter of the Prophet just a few months after the Prophet had passed away. And so we see that tension coming in through from the beginning.